What you are about to hear is not a war movie. It is not speculation. It is the logical conclusion of everything that has been building in the Middle East for the past 18 months, and it almost changed the world forever. Iran made a move they thought was untraceable, a move designed to humiliate two nations, fracture an alliance, and prove that the era of American dominance in the Persian Gulf was finally over. They were wrong. Catastrophically, historically wrong. And tonight we break down exactly how wrong, second by second, weapon by weapon, decision by decision. Before we go further, if you've been following the escalation between Israel, the US, and Iran's proxy network, you already know the tension has been building towards something. Drop a comment right now. Did you think Iran would actually cross this line? We want to know what you saw coming. Let's get into it. To understand what happened in the Strait of Hormuz at 2:41 a.m., you have to understand what Iran has been doing for the past 2 years beneath the surface, literally and figuratively. Since 2023, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, has been quietly converting a fleet of commercial vessels, oil tankers, cargo ships, even fishing trawlers into what Western intelligence calls floating forward operating bases. These are not warships. They carry no military registry. They fly flags of convenience from nations like Panama and Togo. But beneath their rusted hulls and civilian paint jobs, they carry electronic intelligence suites, drone launch platforms, and in at least 3 confirmed cases, anti-ship missile components disguised as industrial machinery. The IISS, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, flagged this network as early as late 2024. The report was clear. Iran was building a gray zone naval capability designed to operate in the seams between war and commerce, too aggressive to ignore, but too ambiguous to shoot. That ambiguity was the entire strategy. 3 weeks before the Strait incident, the USS Bataan, an amphibious assault ship conducting freedom of navigation operations in the Gulf of Oman, was hit by a high-powered laser fired from what appeared to be a civilian cargo vessel flagged to a Central Asian nation. The laser didn't sink anything. It didn't need to. For 30 seconds, 2 sailors on the bridge wing suffered flash blindness. The ship's electro-optical sensors were temporarily degraded. And Iran's commanders, watching from a surveillance feed, got exactly what they wanted. They got to see how fast the Americans reacted, how high up the decision went, and whether Washington would escalate or swallow it. Washington issued a formal diplomatic protest. Tehran read that as weakness. It was the last miscalculation they would make for a long time. Here's the question I want you to sit with. If you were an Iranian admiral watching the US absorb a laser attack without a kinetic response, what would you think was possible next? Tell us in the comments, because the answer to that question explains everything that came after. The ship was called the Piruz, a name that means victorious in Farsi. Registered commercially, ostensibly carrying industrial equipment, it had been loitering 19 nautical miles off the coast of Oman for 4 days. US and Israeli intelligence had flagged it. It was being watched. At 2:41 a.m., the Piruz launched 2 small combat drones from a concealed deck platform, not surveillance drones. These were armed, each carrying approximately 6 pounds of shaped explosive charge, modified variants of the Shahed 136 design that Iran has been refining since its use in Ukraine. The target was the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, a Nimitz-class carrier operating as part of a joint U.S.-Israeli naval exercise called Iron Trident, a high-visibility deterrence operation that had been publicly announced 2 weeks earlier. Let that sink in for a second. Iran launched armed drones at a U.S. aircraft carrier, a ship carrying over 5,000 American sailors. A symbol of American power projection that has kept the Persian Gulf open since 1979. This was not a probe. This was not a test. This was a strike. The logic behind it was brutal in its simplicity. If even one drone reaches that flight deck, if even one Hornet burns, Iran proves to every proxy from Hezbollah to the Houthis, and to every watching nation that the carrier is no longer untouchable. The psychological impact alone would be worth more than any military objective. Iran's commanders believed they had a window. They believed the Eisenhower's defenses would be in a reduced posture during the pre-dawn exercise transition period. They believed their electronic masking using the commercial vessel's radar signature to hide the drone launch would buy them 90 seconds of undetected flight time. They had 11 seconds before the Americans already had a firing solution. Here is the part the Russian Navy learned the hard way, and Iran apparently forgot. The US Navy does not wait to be shot at before it is ready to shoot back. The Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group in 2025 operates under what the Navy calls a cooperative engagement capability architecture, a networked combat system that fuses targeting data from every ship, aircraft, and sensor in the battle group into a single, real-time operational picture. No single ship is fighting alone. Every ship is an extension of one enormous distributed weapon. At 2 hours, 41 minutes and 9 seconds a.m. 9 seconds after launch, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft orbiting at altitude detected the drone's signatures, not from radar emission, from passive infrared. The drone's engines were warm. The Hawkeye's sensor suite sees heat. It saw them instantly. At 2 hours, 41 minutes and 22 seconds a.m., the track data was shared across the entire strike group via encrypted data link. Every ship in the formation had the picture simultaneously. No phone calls, no confirmation requests up the chain of command. The system spoke, and the sailors listened. At 2 hours, 41 minutes and 31 seconds a.m., 50 seconds after launch, the USS Gravely, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer operating as the carrier's close-in escort, fired a single RIM 162 Evolved Sea Sparrow missile. The ESSM accelerated to over Mach 3. It pulled targeting corrections mid-flight fed by the Hawkeye's passive track. It did not miss. The first drone was gone before it crossed the 10 nautical mile threshold. The second drone lasted 4 more seconds. It was engaged by the Eisenhower's own Phalanx CIWS, the 20mm Gatling gun system that fires 4,500 rounds per minute. The drone came apart 3 miles from the ship's hull. Total engagement time from detection to kill, 41 seconds. The Pirus had launched what it believed was an undetected strike. It had instead walked into a trap that was already armed and waiting. Are you shocked by how fast that kill chain moved? Because most people don't realize that the modern U.S. Carrier Strike Group essentially cannot be surprised in its own operating area, at least not by anything subsonic. Let me know in the comments if you want a deeper breakdown of the ESSM versus the Phalanx, because that decision to use both in sequence was not an accident. Here is what most coverage of this incident missed entirely. The Eisenhower did not detect those drones alone. 12 minutes before the Pirus launched, an Israeli Air Force Gulfstream G550 Shavit, a signals intelligence aircraft that Israel operates under commercial cover, had already detected anomalous electromagnetic activity from the Pirus. The drone launch preparation sequence generates a specific power signature when the guidance systems run their pre-launch checks. Israeli SIGINT analysts recognized the signature. They had seen it before in Gaza, in Lebanon, in the Red Sea. They passed the warning directly to the Eisenhower's Combat Intelligence Cell with a single encrypted transmission: imminent launch, platform designated standby. That transmission is why the Hawkeye crew was already in an enhanced scan posture when the drones left the deck. That transmission is why the Gravely's TAO Tactical Action Officer already had his hand on the firing authorization when the track came in. Israel didn't fire a missile that night, but Israel pulled the trigger. This is the part that unnerves Iran's strategic planners more than the shootdown itself. Because Iran's entire proxy strategy, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, militia networks in Iraq and Syria, is built on the assumption that they can exploit the seams between American and Israeli intelligence. That what Israel knows, America doesn't know in time. That what America responds to, Israel hasn't already preempted. In the Strait of Hormuz, that assumption was incinerated along with those 2 drones. The Pirus knew immediately that the strike had failed. Iranian naval communications, monitored by both U.S. and Israeli assets, lit up with frantic encrypted traffic. The Pirus began maneuvering to withdraw, turning north, increasing speed, attempting to blend back into commercial traffic. It didn't get far before something extraordinary happened. 2 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, which had been orbiting at altitude above the exercise area, descended toward the Pirus at high speed. They did not fire missiles. They fired something more precise, focused electronic attack. The ALQ-218 jamming pods aboard the Growlers can generate a directional, high-intensity signal that doesn't just block communications, it saturates receivers, corrupts navigation systems, and at close range, can damage unprotected electronics permanently. Within 90 seconds of the Growlers beginning their run, the Pirus lost its satellite communications uplink to Tehran. Its navigation system began displaying corrupted positional data. Its crew, below decks, experienced sudden equipment failures across multiple systems simultaneously. The ship was not sunk. It was not boarded. It was not fired upon with a single kinetic round. It was simply switched off. And then, because the U.S. Navy apparently believes in making its points memorably, a Virginia-class fast attack submarine that had been trailing the Pirus for 72 hours performed a deliberate, controlled surface maneuver 400 yards off its port bow. A submarine surfacing next to you means it has been beneath you, invisible, the entire time you thought you were operating freely. It means every transmission you made, every course change, every preparation, all of it was observed. It means that the decision not to sink you was a choice, made deliberately, and it can be unmade. The Pirus stopped. For 11 minutes, the ship sat dead in the water. Then slowly it turned south away from the carrier group, away from the exercise area back toward Iranian territorial waters. It never reached them under its own navigation. U.S. and coalition maritime patrol assets tracked it all the way to a port facility near Bandar Abbas, where it was met by IRGCN officials. We don't know what those conversations sounded like. But we know that within 48 hours, Iran's foreign ministry issued a statement denying any involvement in any incident in the Strait of Hormuz. That denial was the most honest thing Iran said that week, because it meant they understood exactly what had happened, exactly how completely they had been exposed, and exactly how much worse it could have been. The gray zone strategy that Iran has refined for 2 decades relies on a fundamental premise: that the gap between provocation and response is wide enough to operate in. That you can do enough damage to matter without doing enough to justify the full weight of a military reply. In the Strait of Hormuz at 2:41 a.m., that gap closed to zero. The reason is not just technology. It is decision architecture. Iran's IRGCN commander on the Pirus almost certainly needed authorization from senior Revolutionary Guard leadership, possibly from Tehran itself, before launching those drones. That authorization process, even in a streamlined chain of command, takes minutes. The TAO on the USS Gravely has delegated authority to defend the force. He does not call Washington. He does not wait for a flag officer to confirm. He assesses the threat, applies the rules of engagement, and acts. The entire kill chain from Israeli warning to American shootdown ran faster than Iran's command structure could have processed the decision to launch a second wave. By the time Iranian leadership understood that the strike had failed, U.S. submarines were already repositioning. Israeli aircraft were already updated on new target sets. The Eisenhower was already recovering aircraft from its pre-dawn exercise rotation as though nothing had interrupted it. Because for the carrier, nothing had. That's the real psychological blow. Not that the drones were shot down, but that shooting them down didn't even break the carrier group's operational rhythm. They were a nuisance, a footnote, a problem that the system handled automatically while the humans went back to work. Think about that for a moment, and tell us in the comments, does that level of integrated capability change how you think about the balance of power in the Gulf? Because it should. When the sun came up over the Strait of Hormuz, the Eisenhower was still flying sorties. The Gravely was back on station. The submarine had disappeared beneath the surface as silently as it had risen from it. In Tehran, there were no official announcements. In the Houthi-controlled media, there was no celebration. Along the Hezbollah communication networks that Israeli and American intelligence was monitoring, there was something unusual quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a demonstration that no one expected. Iran built a shadow fleet to hide its ambitions. The US and Israel just showed them that shadows don't exist when the people looking for you can see in the dark. The gray zone was supposed to be Iran's advantage. Instead, it became the most surveilled, most targeted, most catalogued operational theater in the history of modern naval warfare. Every ship in that network, every converted tanker, every intelligence trawler, every vessel playing commercial while carrying military intent is now in a database. Its engine acoustic signature, its communication habits, its crew patterns, its drone launch preparation signature. Iran didn't just lose 2 drones that morning. They gave NATO and Israel a complete operational map of how their shadow fleet thinks, moves, and attacks. And they got nothing in return except a very clear message about what comes next if they try it again. The rules of the water were never ambiguous. They just needed to be demonstrated. What part of this engagement hit hardest for you? Was it the 4-1 second kill chain? The Israeli intelligence warning that preempted the entire attack? Or the submarine surfacing right next to a ship that thought it was invisible? Drop your answer below. And if you want to keep following the real technical story of how this conflict is being fought, not the headlines, but the hardware, the doctrine, and the decision-making, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on. The next move in this theater is already being planned. We'll be ready when it happens.